everyone. I'm Abigail. This is Bella, and welcome to another Two Kids interview.
Today we are joined by New York Times bestselling author Jen Calonita.
It's
Miss
okay.
Calonita has written many books, including the Lost Legend series, the Fairy Tale Reform School series,
The Royal Academy Rebels series, the VIP series, the Belle series.
Fairy Godmother, Go the Distance, Mirror Mirror, Conceal Don't Feel, and many more.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We are super excited for your next book, Isle of Ever. We saw the blurbs by a few of our favorite authors, Stuart Gibbs, James Ponti, and Chris Grabenstein. What can you tell us about the book?
I am so thankful my friends read the book early for me. This book is a little different than anything I've ever done before. It's part adventure, part mystery, and it's really inspired by the fact that as a kid, my grandparents had a home on Long Island in New York near the beach, and supposedly a very famous pirate, Captain Kidd, left some of his treasure behind there and it was buried there. And so when I would get bored, my grandmother would tell me to go search for buried treasure. And I always wondered where the treasure could be if no one found it. And I thought maybe it was hidden on an island that no one could see. And maybe that treasure was also a fountain of youth, that if you took it, you could live forever. And if somebody found that treasure, what would it mean? And so I don't want to give away, there's a lot of twists in it, but a girl your age goes looking for the treasure. And if she finds it, she collects a huge inheritance, a huge fortune that's been left for her by an ancestor in the 1800s. And she follows clues left for her by this ancestor to try to find the treasure, and then realizes there might be more than a treasure at stake. There might be some people who've been missing for a long time, and there might be a pirate involved and a lot of other fun things. So it's fun, it's different. I'm excited about it. I hope you'll like it.
I love a
Since
good
Isle of
treasure hunt story.
Oh,
I'm
good.
excited.
Good.
since Isle of Ever is going to be a series, did you put anything that doesn't mean that much for the first book but might be for a future one?
Very good question. Yes. It's funny because I like writing a series because I like building the story. I feel like it's like meeting a friend. You want to spend more and more time with that friend. And that's how it feels for me when I'm writing a new book series. I want to spend more time with these characters. And so I have a whole Google Doc with all the facts because this story takes place in 1825 and 2025. And there's so many facts that I'm playing with and trying to drop in little hints for book 2 and then for book 3. And it's hard to do, but I'm having fun with it.
What was the first Disney movie you fell in love with?
Well, for me, it was Beauty and the Beast because it was very popular when I was in high school. And I loved that Belle loved books. And I loved that she loved to read. And I loved that she had brown hair. I felt like she was the first princess I knew with brown hair. And so she was my favorite princess in the beginning. She was my first favorite. And now I would say it's probably Princess Anna from Frozen because I feel like we're very similar. I'm very chatty. I talk a lot. I'm a little bit clumsy. I'm very loyal to my friends and family. And I feel like we have a lot in common. We would be good friends.
Yes.
When you are writing characters everybody knows and loves or hates, is there extra pressure in getting them right?
Absolutely. When I'm writing for Disney and I'm writing about characters that have already existed, you want to make sure you're true to those characters. You don't want to read a book about Hercules or Flynn Rider and think this doesn't sound like Flynn Rider or Hercules at all. So I watch the movies over and over again to make sure I feel like I can hear the character's voice. I feel like I can really get their personality. And it's a lot of fun with heroes, but it's even more fun when you're writing villains because the villains are some of the most fun characters you get to write.
When you're writing a line in your book for a character like Elsa, do you hear Idina Menzel's voice when you read it back to yourself?
I do. I definitely do. I feel like I can always hear that character in my head. And sometimes when I'm writing a Disney book, I will actually have the movie playing in the background on the TV. And I have two boys, and sometimes they'll come home from school and they'll say, Mom, you are not watching Frozen again, are you? And I'm like, yes, I am. But it really helps me to just hear the characters and get a feel for them.
Makes sense.
How does it change anything when you write a Disney animated character in a young adult book?
Well, for that, your storyline is going to be a little bit different. Like the Lost Legends series is a younger series. I feel like it's a lot of fun. It's our favorite heroes as kids, so they're probably around your age. And when I'm writing a character for a young adult novel, sometimes the things they experience might be a little bit more challenging, a little bit older. Some of those books, like Go the Distance, deal with death and the underworld and loss. And so, some of those experiences that characters face when they're older come into play more. That said, I would say The Isle of Ever is very much a story that takes place in the 1800s and now, and it's about characters who are really struggling to find themselves and be good people and deal with things a lot of kids deal with. So it depends on the story, but I would say for Disney young adult stories, definitely bigger challenges the older the book is.
When you're writing an original character, how do you ask them questions? How do you get to know
Well, it's funny you should ask that. So I have another friend. She's a writer. Her name is Elizabeth Yulberg. She's written The
them?
Great
Okay.
Shelby Holmes, and she's written a few other things. And she always said to me, I take my characters with me for the day when I'm first figuring out who they are. So if I get up in the morning and I'm eating breakfast, what would they eat for breakfast? Am I going to school? Am I going to work? How do I get there? Where do I live? And so that was a practice I started doing. And I would always keep my writer's notebook handy and just ask myself who these characters were, what their experience was. Benny is the main character in Isle of Ever. She's been raised by a single mom. They've moved around a lot as kids. Benny's always really worried about money. And so I tried to really put myself in her shoes and think, what would it be like if I was her age and moving all the time and worried about money, and then all of a sudden somebody came forward offering me this huge inheritance, but I had to play a game in order to find it. How far would I go to make sure I won that game? So I try to definitely do that. It's a great question, but I like to spend time with the characters and think of them like friends and real people.
We actually interviewed Miss Yulberg.
You did. She's a very good friend of mine, and we have traveled together over the years. I just spoke to her on Friday. She's a very good friend of mine, and I feel like authors, they always try to help each other out. We work alone a lot, so sometimes when we're struggling with a story, and Elizabeth and I are working on something very similar right now that we can't talk about yet, but when we talk to each other, we ask each other questions about our stories. We try to help each other. We read each other's work, and that's a very helpful practice.
Do you enjoy writing heroes or villains more?
I don't. I mean, I love a hero. I love a hero story. I love an underdog story. I love the idea of somebody figuring out how to make some magic happen for themselves. And I love stories that bring magic into the world because I feel like magic is all around us if we just try to look for it. There's good everywhere if we look for it. But the villains are fun to write, right? Because they have the best lines. They get to say all those mean things or those kind of scary things that I mean, I certainly don't say. So sometimes I have a lot of fun writing them. Like I've written The Evil Queen and Hades, and there's some really fun villains in Isle of Ever as well. And it's always fun to work on their dialogue.
I've never considered Hades particularly evil besides the Hercules movies. He just has a
True.
bad reputation because he's the god of the underworld.
Right. And you're very right about that. I think in Hercules, because I was writing a Hercules story, I had to definitely think of him like a villain. But, he has a job just like all the gods on Mount Olympus, and he gets a bad rap because he's the underworld. In terms of Hercules, he just has the funniest lines. So he was enjoyable to write.
Writing a book is a big commitment. So when you come up with an idea, how do you become sure that this is the story that you want to tell?
Another great question. For me, I find that when I keep my writer's notebook and I'm thinking about an idea again and again and again, and more ideas about that idea come together, I say to myself, this might be an idea you want to explore. Not every idea you have is necessarily going to turn into a book, or it might not turn into a book today, but maybe you're going to come back to that idea years from now. Like Isle of Ever is something I've been thinking about since I was a kid. Really, the same thing was Fairy Tale Reform School. It was an idea that came to me as a kid. So I always say, keep your notebook, never throw anything out. My mom kept all my writing as a kid because you never know when you might pick that idea up again. But it's the ones that really hold on to you that you can't stop thinking about. Those are the ones that you really want to see. Is there a story here worth telling? And then figure it out.
You have author friends. Is there a real funny story you can tell us from when you've been together?
Oh my gosh. I have such wonderful author friends. They are they're so much fun. Stuart Gibbs, um, he is wonderful. Obviously, he loves animals. And last year we were in Florida for a conference, and Mary Mancusi was with us, and she writes Disney books as well. We wrote a book called Polar Nights together about Elsa and Anna, and it was Stuart, Mary, and I. And Stuart really wanted to go see manatees, and he found a park that had manatees, and we had to be somewhere at 2 o'clock. And Stuart said, "It's fine. I have a car. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there, and we're gonna be back in no time." And we got to this manatee park, and it was very, very popular. So the line to get in was like an hour and a half long. So I thought we were going to turn around and go back, but Stuart was like, "Nope, we're going to make this happen. We can do this." And so he found somewhere else to park like a mile away, and we hiked into the park, and Stuart was like moving really, really fast, and Mary and I were like running to catch up with him, and we made it to the manatee park, and we got to spend like 15 minutes looking at the manatees, and then we had to do it all over again and run back so we wouldn't be late for our book festival. But he was determined, and it was really cool to get to see these manatees up close. So it was a great experience, but it was pretty funny.
That sounds hilarious. Book bans are an increasing trend. Can you give us your thoughts?
It's a real problem, right? Because I feel like every kid deserves to see themselves in a book. And I feel like we have libraries for a reason. I don't buy every book that I want to read. There are some books, some weeks that I might say, okay, I'm going to buy this book. And then next week I might take a book out of the library. And it's so important that our libraries have books for everyone and we have access to them. And what worries me about book banning is that somebody else is deciding for us whether or not you have the right to read a book. And I feel that's really unfair. um it's fine, and as kids, I think it's a great thing to talk to your mom and dad when you want to check out a new book series and you want to read something. But I don't think anybody has the right to take a book off a shelf, and I don't think anybody has the right to say we shouldn't carry this book. I think there's reasons libraries have sections, right? There's a young adult section, there's a kids section, but I don't think anybody has the right to take a book off the shelf. I think it's dangerous when we start to do that. So I am not in support of book banning at all.
I agree. Can you tell us exactly where you were at Andrea and what you were doing when you found out the first time that you were a New York Times bestselling author?
I was home, and the funny thing, it was for the book Go the Distance, which is a Disney twisted tale. And it was during the pandemic. So I was really nervous about this book because I couldn't do book signings. I couldn't go anywhere. My kids were like, Mom, you have to join TikTok. You have to be on social media talking about this book. And so I really didn't know what was going to happen because I thought, how does a book sell when we can't bring it to stores and schools and visit people? And it took on a life of its own. I think people really love Hercules and people really like the Twisted Tale series. And my editor called me in the afternoon and she said, "Are you sitting down?" And she told me I had hit the New York Times bestseller list. And it is almost 18 years after I started writing books. So, so many people think you have to hit the New York Times bestseller list with your first book. No, you just have to keep working at it. And I feel so thankful that I'm still writing books. Now it's almost 20 years since I started writing, and it was such a wonderful experience hitting the New York Times and USA Today that day. My editor sent me like a really nice gift with, the New York Times on it. And I have it right in my office and I look at it. And I think this is why we work hard so people can find our books and read them. So it was a great moment.
Makes
What
sense.
writer has had the most influence on you?
Well, there was a series that was really popular right before I started writing books. It was called the Princess Diary series. You're probably familiar with the movies with Anne Hathaway. They were a book series first, and Meg Cabot wrote them. And it was the first time I had read a book that was specifically for teens. It was a teen book, and it was written like a diary. And Mia Thermopolis, the young princess, was the main character. And she was funny, and the story was in first person. And I felt like she was talking directly to me. And I loved it so much. And I was so inspired. And I said, I would love to write a story like this, but maybe I'd love to write one about a young Hollywood celebrity. And that's when I first got the idea for my first book, which was Secrets of My Hollywood Life. And I thought, if Meg Cabot can do it, maybe I can do it too.
What advice do you have for young writers?
I would say finish your story. I know it's so hard, right? Because here we're working on an idea. We don't necessarily know all the pieces of that idea. We might know the start, we might know a main character, we don't know where the story's going. But I would say you have to prove to yourself you can finish a story. I don't care if that story is one paragraph, one page, or 10 pages, but prove you can finish it because it's so much easier to think to yourself, you know what? This story is too hard. Forget it. I don't want to even look at this story anymore. I want to write something new because the new shiny idea is always much more exciting. But the problem is if you don't prove you can finish the actual story you started, you're never going to finish those stories. You're going to constantly keep jumping from one idea to the next. And so I always say a first draft is just what it is, right? It's a first draft. Nobody's going to see it. Finish it and then go back and make it better and prove to yourself you can finish it and go back and make it better. It's really important.
What are you writing now?
Well, I'm actually working on three books at once, which I don't recommend, but one book hasn't been announced yet. I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be announced soon, and I can't wait to tell you about it. That book, it came up really last minute, and I didn't have a lot of time to write it, and I didn't want to say no. Then I'm working on Isle of Ever 2. So I'm working on that, and I'm working on Fairy Godmother was the first book in a new Disney series about the magic makers in Disney World. And I'm working on book 2 in that series right now, which will come out next fall. And I can't say who it is yet, but it's another Disney magic maker. So it's like their origin story. How do the characters who provide magic in Disney worlds, how does their story begin? Where is their story? What does it come from? So I'm working on that as well, and that should be announced soon too.
Yes. Now it's time for our Turbo 10.
10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay, I think so. Okay, I'm ready.
Number 1. What is your favorite phrase to use?
My favorite what?
Phrase to use.
Oh, I use it too much. My editor said I do. They looked at each other. So I always have characters looking at each other. My editor said you do it too much.
Number 2, what is one subject you'd love to learn more about?
Oh, French. I switched from French to Spanish in high school because I found French too hard. So now I'm doing Duolingo because I really want to master French and go back to Paris and be able to speak in French.
Number 3, what is your go-to snack food?
I love trail mix, like some almonds and chocolate chips. That's my favorite.
Number 4, what was your favorite book growing up?
Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume. It was like the book that changed everything for me. I found it funny and I just loved it.
I actually read that one.
It was funny, right? I love that book.
Number 5, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
If I could go anywhere,
Teleport.
oh, teleport. I'd probably go to the Magic Kingdom. I mean, I am a Disney girl and I love my parks. And even though I was just in Orlando for work and I got to go to the Magic Kingdom, I would go back any day of the week.
Number 6, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I would love to fly. I think that would make life so much easier if I could just fly anywhere I wanted at any time. I would love that.
Number 7. Oh, 7. What was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
I loved Garfield. Do you know who Garfield is? He was a cat. He was like a very cranky cat. He was my absolute favorite.
The Garfield movie just came out.
I know. I think I'm going to have to watch that.
It wasn't that good.
Okay, I'll stick with the cartoon.
Number 8, what is your favorite rainy day activity?
My favorite rainy day activity, watching movies. We are a big movie house and we love to watch movies, and some of our favorites again and again, like Back to the Future. I'm hoping we watch Hocus Pocus this week because Halloween is coming. It's not unsurprising for me to turn on Tangled or Frozen or Enchanted. I love Enchanted.
I actually saw the Back to the Future Broadway show recently. Also,
So did
tomorrow.
I.
Nice. Tomorrow is National Horror Movie Day.
Oh, is it? My son loves horror movies. I'm very scared of my own shadow, but I have watched one or two of the Scream movies with him.
Yes. Number 9. If you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
Ooh, 3 dinner guests. Who would they be? Okay. Alive or dead?
No rules.
Okay. So definitely, okay, so 2 would probably be my grandmothers because they're no longer with us, and I just feel like they influenced so much my life. One really helped me develop my love of reading. The other helped me with my creativity and my love of being outside. And I would love to spend more time with them. I write a lot of grandmother characters because of them. 3rd person I'd probably invite to dinner would be, I'm trying to think of who would I pick.
Can even be a fictional character.
It could be a famous person.
Fictional or
or a fictional person.
yeah.
Well, maybe I would invite Sophie from the School for Good and Evil. I know she's so, vain and full of herself, but she's such a fun character. I love the School for Good and Evil series by Soman Shinani, and I would love to have dinner with Sophie. She'd be a lot
I
of fun.
actually interviewed him.
Soman is so nice.
Number
Woo!
10, what is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
don't be afraid to ask a question. I think a lot of times we always shut ourselves down and we think, oh, that person's going to say no. It doesn't hurt to ask the question. The worst they can say is no, but put yourself out there. Don't be afraid. Speak up, use your voice, and ask. I wouldn't have written my first book if I hadn't. I asked an editor at Little Brown Books for Young Readers if they would have coffee with me so I could tell her my book idea, and she said yes. And I could have been scared and not done it, but it changed everything. So always ask. The worst someone can say is no.
You were awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
And thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
two.
spending this time with us.
We can't
You
wait to
had
read your
wonderful
future
questions.
books. Thank you.
Thank you, girls. You had such great questions.